Oh, goodness. Good tato, everyone, and welcome to the Mayoral Forum on Wednesday, the 8th of June. We've got Gary and Mayor Chadwick. Steve, can I call you Steve? Chadwick. We're very informal on Tauranga City Council. We don't have a worship. We don't have worships. We don't worship. So I'm a bit informal. I do apologise. Look, it's really nice to have everyone together. I just wonder if we could get that door closed down the end. Doug, you seem to be there in splendid isolation.
That's because I'm going with it.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes, so I mean I do have a run sheet here. So we just note that the recording, we are being recorded and it will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting and archived for a period of 3 years in case anyone is interested. Goodness. Okay, so apologies.
Yes, just for lateness, Stephanie Solomon will be a little bit late.
And we also have Taupo Mea and CE. I guess they've gone up to the Air New Zealand Mayoral trip. Well, it's good to see we're all here today.
John Hollyoak's an apology as well.
John Hollyoak? Yep. Anyone else? Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Malcolm and Julie, thank you. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried, thank you. So late items, so we've got one new item to be added to the agenda, and that is to recognise our retiring mayors. And although I think there's another meeting scheduled for this Mayoral Forum sometime in September, some of you might be busy campaigning. So we thought, and therefore, chances of getting all the mayors together might be pretty slim. And some of you might be on holiday already. So we thought that we would actually do that today. So is there anything else that we want to add into the agenda while I'm dealing with late items? So would someone like to move, please, that we, Judy and Lynn, we accept this late item? All those in favour say aye. Aye. It's carried. So let me get my little notes out here. So if we begin with Mayor Chadwick, who's been the Mayor of Rotorua since 2013. And I learned, Stevie, I didn't realise that you had been a Rotorua District Councillor prior to coming into Parliament from 1996 to 1999.
Hi.
That was news to me. You must have kept that quiet.
No. Me?
No? Okay. And then, of course, in 1999, Stevie went on to be the MP for Rotorua from 1999 to 2011. And she was a list MP for 3 years. During this time, she held the portfolios of Associate Minister of Health, Minister of Conservation, Minister of Women's Affairs. And she sponsored the Smoke-Free Environments Act and secured funding. Oh, I mean, that in itself is no mean feat to get parliamentarians to agree to smoke-free. And I remember the arguments around bars. I think I might have mounted some of them myself. The poor old RSA veterans not being able to smoke while they were in the bar. But anyway, you got it through, Stevie. But the other thing you did was you winkled $72 million out of Nick Smith, who has to have the deepest pockets that I've ever come across for the clean-up of the Rotorua lakes. And that was an amazing achievement. And then you went on as a business consultant, and of course, Mayor Chadwick was recognised in the 2022 New Year's Honours and appointed a companion of the Queen's Service Order for services for local government and as a member of Parliament. So, Stevie, you've served your community magnificently for a long period of time, and you deserve a good rest. I'm looking here, but actually I know the camera's up there, so well deserved rest, and thank you for all your. I think we should do this.
Well, thank you, and I'd just like to say that I have enjoyed my role as the Mayor enormously, and the privilege of working in both central government and local government. Place shaping and people making is much more significant as a Mayor, and I've loved it. I will have to correct the record that it was Michael Cullen that actually approved the funding for the lakes. And that was very challenging as a backbencher to go to Cabinet with a business case proposal for the lakes, and that was my first ever exposure to Cabinet grueling, and it was good for me actually. And that's something that I'm really proud of still today, that and the smoke-free bill, but also funding for our hospital. And Judy you weren't there at the time, Judy, as the Mayor, but there was a proposal that the DHB would be a new hospital at Whakatane and ours gone. And so we secured 92 million for a new hospital at Rotorua and secured its long-term future, which was also something I'm very happy about with my health background. But in council, I'll be very quick. I've really enjoyed the role of working for 9 years with Jeff, who's sitting beside me today, and I don't want to embarrass him, but the partnership between the Chief Executive and the Mayor is absolutely critical, and we've been able to achieve our Vision 2030 and extend it out to a Vision 2050. We were just talking about it before this meeting. I came in with a letter of expectation for how I envisaged the future of Rotorua, and we've been able to carry out an enormous component of that together. So it is the political will with a plan that is then enacted by the Chief Executive that I find is a very powerful combination for taking a district forward. When I reflect back, the partnership with Te Arawa is the most significant contribution that I think we've made. And we've taken that conversation even a step further with our representation bill, which has rattled the cage constitutionally in Wellington, and I think it needs to be rattled. I really do think that we need to look at the Treaty of Waitangi in the future of local government, whatever is going to be there, and in representation participation. So I still believe in our bill, our local bill, and I'm sure that in central government they're looking at it very closely in terms of what representation can look like and should look like in the future. We've been a lot richer because of our partnership at the decision-making table of council, and the sky hasn't fallen in for everyone. Was very frightened of this. So I'm particularly proud of that. But also, I want to thank other mayors in the region and the chair. We've had funding support to undertake some ambitious projects, both from central government and regional council. Doug, our museum is going to be a challenge going forward, but we'll meet that challenge head on. And I'm not going to retire. I'm just going to go and play in a different pool. And I will be very active. I love this community, and I want to see it thrive and continue to thrive. So thanks for putting the late agenda item up. I'm leaving on my own decision, and I think it's time to play in some other areas about building communities. So thanks to all my colleagues. I hope we can meet and enjoy each other's company in a more informal setting.
Thanks, Steve.
Chief, can I just say one thing? Stevie, I'd just like to acknowledge you, please, as our central government MP in Kawerau, because everyone knows that Kawerau gets pushed between pillar and post, either to Rotorua or East Cape. Depends on which way the government sees us. But over the period of time that I've been the mayor, I think I've had 5 central government MPs, the chair being one of them. And I believe, you took over after Tony Ryle. When we moved into Rotorua. But on behalf of Kawerau, I'd like to thank you very much for all the services you've done. You're well known in our patch. Everyone knows who Steve Chadwick is. And so I'd just like to acknowledge you, all the work you've done for us while you were in Parliament. And I have always known that you always play the game properly. If you look after your local MP, you'll get a little bit further down the track in Wellington rather than going as a headbutting yourself. So, and this is leaving all the politics out of it. But you did a great job. And once again, thank you very much, Steve.
Thanks,
and it's been a pleasure working alongside of you. Cheers.
Okay, so that brings me to Mayor Webber, who has been the Mayor of Western Bay from October 2016 to present. And he was also a Western Bay District Councillor from October 2010, so another long service on behalf of his community. He's also a qualified commissioner, I understand, and has done some commissioner's work. Well, you know, once you retire, Stevie, there's always, and Gary, there is always another career as a commissioner. You never know. But I have to say, on behalf of the Tauranga City Council, since the commissioners have been appointed, that and established, worked hard to re-establish good relationships with our neighbours. Gary has been an absolute stalwart and has given huge amount of time and advice and support. And we have really appreciated that, Gary, with all your knowledge of the district and the history. We've really appreciated that. And I know from my time as MP, when you took over as mayor, the esteem that you were held in, even by the eastern part of the Western Bay. So I know from on the ground how the work that you have done on behalf of your community. I think it was a relief to us all when you were appointed to that national working group for the Three Waters, because we knew then that the Western Bay of Plenty viewpoints would be brought to the table as you worked through some of those issues. And I can't let it go. I think your conversations with central government officials and ministers around the Mayoral roundabout interchange will go down in history as some of the most forthright discussions that I've heard with ministers. You always stuck to your point, and you made it very clear that promises have been made and not delivered, and you stood up for your community, and that's exactly what we're all about. That's why we're all here. So thank you, Gary, for the service that you've given. And I know you are going to retire because you keep telling me, I'm out of here, I'm out of here. But can we have a round of applause for Gary?
Well, thank you for those kind words, Anne. And you missed off one point. I actually started off as a community board member, not being elected, which is very unusual for local government, but most of the things I've done in local government have been about unusual and forthright, as you say. It's been an interesting ride. After spending about 40 years in business, where I've been for automation and digitisation and consolidation, 14 years in local government was a surprise and continues to be a surprise. But I suppose that's what's called lifelong learning. I suppose it's been very interesting because when I joined Western Bay, it had debt of $180 million. Its population was about 20% less than it is today. And right now, our debt is sitting at $80 million. We've still got the highest rates in New Zealand, but others are trying to fight us for that rate, that point. But it's as Stevie said, it's been working with Mana Whenua, I suppose, has been the highlights of my career. And Doug, I'd have to say to you at the Regional Council, your support for the under the radar things we have done, and I must admit central government put a bit of CIP money into it, but we've managed to get 3 waters to most of the marae in our district. And we've done that under the radar by having them connected up to reticulated systems or onto offset systems, which we've helped the local iwi design. And your contribution, Doug, to getting us over the wire was very interesting. And you may recall that was Project Mayoral when you were in politics.
Yeah.
And over the last 6 years of my time as the Mayoralty, we have completed that project using ratepayer funds, regional council funds, and some central government funds. So, we're one of the few districts in New Zealand that's gone and got all of our marae reticulated and up to current standards. We've still got a couple to go, but we're about 80% there. The other thing that's been a real highlight was getting Pani Point back to the original owners, correcting some really terrible history in New Zealand, and to say that local government can't do the things that it needs to. Yes, it can if it puts its mind to it. And on top of that, we return Tahatara Point, which is very sacred to Pirirakau at the bottom of the Wairau River. We've returned that back to their ownership as well. Again, outside of treaty settlements and all that sort of thing, we did it because it was the right thing to do. I suppose in closing, I reflect on my very first meeting at the Mayoral Forum, where we as all councils had spent $750,000 working out how we could do things together prior to my becoming the mayor. And the very first Mayoral Forum, we voted on that. Doug, thank you for your support, but losing 5-2 was an interesting meeting. And to say, some of us said, if you don't do it yourselves, you'll have it done to you. Well, 3 waters, get over it, it's being done to us, because 6 years ago, we as a region couldn't see the merits of working together in the areas of 3 waters, a common back office system, a common roading contract. Interesting stuff that we could have done without losing any sovereignty at all, but we lost the opportunity. And so that's the way of the world. As I said, I've spent a long time in trying to automate and improve things. So I'll retire and go and join those other hobbies of snail racing and watching the grass grow, which is about as fast as it operates. So thanks for your kind words. It's been a good 6 years, and I wish you all well. For those that are continuing to stay on, it's not going to be an easy 3 years, but all the best, and thank you.
Cheers, Gary, thank you. And then that brings us to Malcolm. Gosh, it's hard to know what to say about Malcolm. I mean, really. Kawerau Mayor from 2007, that's just an amazing record. And you're on council before that from 2001. And I think, I had the pleasure of being your local MP and saw the work that you and your council did to really almost rehabilitate Kawerau from a place that people didn't want to live to a place where you were actually having to buy land to build houses to cope with the burgeoning population. And I remember watching the value of houses in Kawerau go from, at one stage I remember you could buy quite an average house for under $100,000, well, you'd be hard pressed to find anything under $200,000 or $300,000 today, and up to $1 million. And that's a reflection of the work that Malcolm, you have led in your town, and the confidence that you gave to a whole range of people to do some different stuff, simply because you had to do it. And I remember being so envious of the way that the council was able to bring together your whole industrial sector to work as one, so that when you were pitching for business, you actually had your industrial sector sitting around the table, all talking about what they as individual companies could be contributing to some huge projects. And you led all that. And that is not insignificant. Kawerau is a small town. It's had lots of problems. And we've talked about some of those over the years. I remember that group of young men that you whisked out of town over to the meatworks over in Te Aroha, and you were so passionate about the opportunities that you felt as an individual, as the leader of your community, the responsibility that you had to make sure that those young men had an opportunity to succeed in life. And you even went round, I remember you telling me, you even went round and talked to some of the families that were putting pressure on them to come on home. And I just think that you are the epitome of a small town mayor, a small town leader who really has the community at the heart. And in 2015, I know you became the chair of the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs. And I'd have to say along with that you're one of the best nags that I've ever known, because you nagged me constantly about supporting Mayor's Task Force for Jobs. I mean, not quite as good a nag as I am, but I learned from the master, obviously. But no, in serious, Malcolm, you have done an amazing job and given huge service to your community. I know your community recognises that. I think we all know that your community recognises that, and we all here wish you the very best in whatever you choose to do next. So let's put our hands together for that.
Thank you for those kind words, Anne. I won't call you Anne. I won't call you Chair right now. Look, yeah, it's been a hell of a journey, to be honest, and 9 terms in council is taken its toll, as far as my family, my business, but it's been a great trip. I've had a lot of good teachers, and one in particular I'm going to mention, and that's Lynn Hartley. And I've used her philosophy all the way along my career in local government. I've kept my deputies. I've gone through 3 deputies. I've kept them close to my hip. I've always made sure they're included. And can I just acknowledge, please, my deputy beside me, Baleen, she was the one that really did the mahi as far as getting those young men and, can I say, women into seasonal work over in Te Aroha. But 2 CEOs, not bad. And the best one is 2 secretaries. Not too bad over 21 years of being the mayor. So yeah, as I say, it's been a hell of a journey, and the last 6 months was a little bit traumatic to my family and myself, the loss of our business. But hey, you get off, brush yourself off and get on with it. I totally concur with what Gary said. I think local government is going to be very, very challenging in the next 3 years. Not necessarily from an impossible situation, but it's just that transition, the changes that we may be in for. And I think the way to do that is to engulf the thing and take it on and get on with it. Get on with what we're doing and serving your communities to the very, very best you can. It's been as I say, I've been around a long while now. I'm not quite as bad as Tim, and I haven't quite got to that point in life where I'm not too sure whether I'm coming or going, but, and that's no disrespect to Tim, because he's done a hell of a job down in Invercargill. But I don't want to go out under a cloud. I'm going on my own, under my own steam, but it's more of a succession plan that I've been working for the last 2 years, to be honest. And I want, nobody has out of my council has ever stood against me, and it's time for councillors to step up. There's been a lot of wannabes that have had a go and have been absolutely crushed, to be honest. Now, that's no reflection on me. I think it's more of a reflection on themselves. But yeah, so it's more of a case of stepping aside for particularly my deputy, and I hope I'm not going to preempting anything there, but nonetheless, I'll put a plug in for her. And I'm looking for another challenge in local government. So I'm going to be standing for regional council, and that's something that really interests me. And I think we've, just being the smallest district council, we've always kept close to the bigger picture stuff, and particularly under 2 chairs of regional council over my term, with John Cronin and now Doug Leader. And I seek their wisdom regularly, and I've always had a reasonably good rapport with both of those gentlemen. We don't always agree, and that's good. We shouldn't always agree. But so yeah, 2 mayors in Aporiki, 4 mayors in Whakatane that have been close to me. I've always worked with them. I've not always agreed with each and every one of those people, but we've always worked very well together. And particularly with the PGF funding, I think it just shows if you stick together, you can move mountains. But if you go it alone, by golly, it's a big world out there. So all the very best to everybody for the new up and coming elections, and for Tauranga, because Tauranga plays a big part in our world. We're only a little manufacturing town up the road, but by gee, we exacerbate a lot of your issues: roading, rail, port, and I just hope that everything goes well for the Bay of Plenty region, because it is a growing region, and it's got a huge potential or a huge future in the future. But thank you very much. Thank you for your support as my MP, and 2 of your other colleagues, and as I say, for Steve and Kitty Tapu Allen. It's been a hell of a journey. When you're in a place like Kawerau, and it's well known, it's a Labour stronghold, and I've got to be very political when people say to me, hanging out with all those Tories and all the rest of it. I say, no, I'm working for you, and it's no good going against any particular party. I leave all that behind, and it's always worked well for me. And talking about the housing thing, I don't know whether I should thank you or curse you for it, but
Oh, I know it.
but nonetheless, you know, that was a bit of a blow to us at the time, and I have to say, but it's worked out for the best in the long run. Although we've got to have a discussion about something else here. But thank you very much, and thank you to all my colleagues around the table for their best wishes. Thank you.
And could I just add there, my best wishes to you, Malcolm. You were the most amazing mayor, and the community hub for us as the MP was the butcher's shop. And I'd go there first before I'd go to council, because that's where I got the real oil on what was going on in the town. But your advocacy for your people was an exemplar really for the rest of the country. I never forget you thumping the table with poor Minister Paula Bennett. She could tell a few stories here today, Anne. But he cared about his people. and they were never beneficiaries. They were always people that were worth investing in, and that's what I was so impressed with you, Malcolm, your leadership there, and also the attempts to save the mill, I'll never forget. But you're a great battler, and that's what a mayor should be, and you work with any government to lead the issues before us, and you did it most powerfully. Probably thumping the desk a little too much, Faylene, but all the best to you, and I'll enjoy sharing something a little more informally. I've got lots of stories to tell about Malcolm. All the best.
And Malcolm, get Gary with
Thank
me.
you for that. Oh, sorry, Gary. Go on.
I too thank you for your wise counsel. You were one of the mayors I warmed to when I became the mayor. Your vision for the Bay of Plenty and that hub at Kawerau. I'm sorry I wasn't able to help you get that across the wire, but maybe in your newer role at the regional council, you'll get that there. But you have been an understanding person of the wider networks in the Bay of Plenty and the criticality of the Port of Tauranga. And I really thank you for your support and wise counsel. It's been great catching up with you in Wellington on occasions, but I'm sad to lose that friendship. But hopefully we'll keep it together somehow. All the best.
Thank you for that. Gary, I can assure you the friendship won't be lost. And I have to say thank you for the support you and your knowledge of McKee Road and what that arterial route, the value of that. So it's been great. And to Steve, I just have to acknowledge one thing, that those visits to the butcher shop, I have to say, and I say this with respect to the late John Chadwick, we did a lot of business, John and I, because he always come there and he always wanted pork bones and watercress and all the like. So we did pretty well out of it, I have to say, Stevie. So there was probably a little bit of a reason why I wanted you to come and discuss business in the back of the butcher shop. But thank you very much, and thank John too. That it was a friendship that's going to carry on. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I think that was worthwhile. I think that was worthwhile doing. Huge years of service to be recognised. So let's move on with the agenda. And something quite mundane is the minutes from the last Mayoral Forum. Are there any amendments or anything that anyone wants to raise out of those minutes? No? Would someone like to move? You happy to move, Judy and Malcolm? Confirm those minutes. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. So that brings us to the start of the business, and I've got Sam Fellows here to make a presentation on trade waste. So Sam, if you'd like to come up to the table, thank you. This is a conversation that a number of Doug's on his way. Thank you, Doug. Best of luck. So this is a conversation that a number of us have been having around trade waste. I know it's Pakistani's talking about it, but I thought it would be helpful for Sam to come and give a presentation of where TCC is. Welcome, Sam.
Kia ora koutou katoa, or Sam Fellows Tapuingoa. I'm the manager of the Sustainability and Waste Division at Tauranga City Council, and yeah, it's a bit daunting coming after all those speeches and things, but get into it. So yeah, in terms of, I suppose, trade waste, I'll do a little correction there. I think trade waste is like when you're oil and things that come up out of cars and then go through the system. So I think we're talking about business waste and construction demolition waste in particular. And so this is the Tamonga transfer station. When it is roughly where it is at the moment, completed is probably the wrong word. It got to a state of being able to be used in about 1997. So yeah, I was living about here up in Papamai as a 7-year-old in 1997 actually. And you can see from here, it's pretty much exactly the same. So this building's been added, a material recycling facility, or MRF as some people call them, MRF. And so I guess you're thinking probably, why is this important to me? Why are we talking about a transfer station in Tauranga City? We've all got transfer stations except for Western Bay in our areas. And so why are you here talking about that? So that for Tauranga City, I think the Tamong transfer station is a good example of probably the old way that we had been doing things. When it was built in 1997, it really catered for the population only at the time. It was really a catch-up mechanism, and probably, I don't know, from speaking out of turn, a lot of things that we've done recently in Tauranga City Council are just solely focused on the here and now, but not thinking about the future. And I guess when I came into this role and we were looking at the redevelopment, that's one thing I picked up as well, is that we were really focused on what TCC was doing and the amount of waste and the amount of construction and all of those types of things and happening in the Tauranga area, but didn't take into account that, this material recycling facility here, pretty much from everyone's districts here, feed into that in some form or the other, whether it's the council collections or it's some of the private collections. Basically everything comes here anyway. So there's already, in a sense, a regional hub. So when we're talking about construction and demolition waste and a few things like that, which I'll catch up to in future slides, is the question that I had in the back of my mind is, why are we basing this off statistics on Tauranga City alone rather than the entire region? And so we'll get into it a bit, the types of awesome things that we're looking at and the things that are cutting edge and leading. But I think waste is one of those things that they're, in my mind, coming in, we get real focused on our own patches and doing the same thing over and over again around the city, and particularly in our region with so many councils, that probably in some parts we need to work a little bit better. And so, and I guess another big part is the standardisation of curbside that's happening. MFE's come out for consultation, and I mean, it seems like pretty much a done deal, and particularly in terms of the food waste. And so they're looking at ensuring that all regions from 2030 have to have food waste collections from curbside and businesses as well. And so for Tauranga City and Western Bay, but it hasn't been decided if it's wider than that, that will be from 2025. So if we're, I guess, in your regions looking at 2025 potentially needing food waste collections, we're saying, well, we've got an option here as well that we can process it locally rather than, as we in Western Bay are doing at the moment, sending it to over to Hampton Downs. And I know that Rotorua is in the throes of the consultation around that stuff at the moment. So I'll get on to the next part of it. So this is, I mean, just drawings and things. This is loosely what we're looking at in terms of, you can see a little bit behind it what was happening before, not too much. So the big change for us is obviously there's stuff that is around recycling here. We've got some education facilities in here, and we recognise that in Tauranga City, one of the things that our residents love the most that they can do and they can see is our water treatment plants. Like people just line up for months on end to get an opportunity to walk through our water treatment plants, whether it's schools and things like that. And for us, it's important that we do the same with our transfer stations, but we do it at a transfer station that's cutting edge and shows kids and communities what actually happens when I put something in the bin and it goes through the process. And we'll get onto that a little bit more. But the real key thing is here is to future-proof it. So we're not just trying to catch up, which again, I think has been the issue for Tauranga City for a long time, is that we're always just trying to catch up with everyone else. But I guess for us, the big push is that actually we start to do something for our region that's leading for the city. So the key part of this whole place is the resource recovery plant and sorting shed. And so we'll get into what it looks like a little bit potentially on the inside. But the beauty of this is that it's state of the art and leading, and so all construction demolition waste can come through here, and it goes through some machinery here, which we'll have a little picture of later, but it's a almost fully automated system that construction and demolition waste comes through, and then optical sorters and other things pull out concrete, and they pull out wood, and they pull out plastic, and they pull out all of those types of things, so that you've got separated waste, so that you can then sell that to someone else, or it can be used in another way. And the real beauty of this, and we have worked a lot with Envirowaste, who manage the transfer station at the moment, and that's, I think, one of the beauties is all this public waste that currently comes in and gets compacted will also go through that machine. So if you are doing a throw out at home, well, obviously we prefer that you recycle it first rather than put it straight through. But if you're doing a throw out at home, or you're doing a small DIY project, they'll put everything that you bring in your trailer through that machine. So we'll get way more diversion. And I know if you've seen anyone going to the dump across all your regions, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there that you know that you could easily pull out, but people don't know how to do it, or they can't do it. And so this facility will enable that to happen as well. And there's nowhere else in the country where that's currently happening at all. So they'll be, the first of the kind. And the Ministry for the Environment's really excited about this as well. And we'll get on to that. And so this is, I guess, one of those little pictures of things. There's a bit of a fly through in here, but I skipped that because it'll take ages. So this is loosely what it looks like on the inside. And so as you can see, there's all the conveyor belts that drop everything. So there's some wood in here, and there's some metal in here, and those types of things. And the beauty about this is that it also means that it's not labour intensive. So our current material recycling facility, although there is quite a bit of automation involved, it's really people heavy. So we found, during the COVID period, that it was hard to recycle things, but also it is quite a dangerous place. We had one of the ladies, someone put a fish hook in something, and so when she was picking it up, it went through her gloves and all of those types of things. And they're not lovely places to work, are they? So I think it's as part of looking forward to how we can make those people's jobs better in terms of operating machinery and doing things around that, rather than being physically on the manual sorting. It also means that if, for whatever reason, this is way more successful than we know, you can just double or triple shift it, because we're talking about small number of people and machinery, rather than making people work at midnight and things like that. And part of this too is here, where this new green waste area is going to be, is our current where our waste is dropped off. And so that's part of our solution in terms of the food waste. So next door to this current transfer station, we're going to be building an enclosed food waste processing facility. It needs to be enclosed because we're near residents, and as anyone who operates transfer station knows, they're complained about a lot of the time, and regional council would definitely know that in terms of our transfer station. But the key there is also that we get the right mix of garden waste, so lawn clippings, tree branches, all of those types of things, and food. So here's a location where we can get that source of it, and then the food waste will go somewhere next door and it'll get mixed in, but also it's not getting shipped a massive distance to get sorted. Picture. And so this is the recycle area, which it will double the current size. It also means that we can cater for new streams that come onto the market that have an e-market, so we can come in. And in terms of the education area that's here, and there's space to park a bus up and all of those types of things, but that's probably less important for all of you outside Tauranga. Again, a little bit more.
It's a tinker shed.
Oh yeah, tinker shed. So it's like the you could bring, say, an old lawnmower in, and some older retired people, like some of the people that may be stepping aside from here. You might want to go in there and fix up some lawnmowers, or you know, people can bring in stuff that's probably not worthy of the dump, but can come in and get fixed up and sold off. And so that's the loose name for it. So some, I know in Hamilton, we went and viewed their transfer station, like their their Salvation Army uses that, so they can do the drop off, but they also use it as a sale point. So the key part of this is really that it's a space that we can rent out to the community, and they can operate whatever they want to do there. So there'll be like a tender process, tender probably being quite a loose word because it's not going to be formal in the business sense, but so that the community can use those spaces to do what they want.
Sam, have you got an education centre there?
Yeah, we do. So the top floor here is going to be where the education centre is, and we're looking, if we get enough money, but we haven't included it, that's one of the ones that we can pull out to make sure that we still meet the budget. A bit of a walkway from there over to the construction demolition area, so you can look right in and see what's happening, and hopefully to the material recycling facility behind, because we reckon, probably every week I'll get a school group asking if they can come in, and it's just too unsafe at the moment for us to be able to do. Gary?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. It's good to see you've got a similar sense of humour to your father, who I worked with in my past life. Us old rascals don't even want to use a lawnmower, let alone rework on one. But getting back, and I suppose my point to you is, thank you for bringing this to the Mayoral Forum. This is the sort of agenda item I think should be on the Mayoral Forum. And I go back to even before I was the mayor, we all met in Te Puke at the golf club about 9 years ago and said, why aren't we doing this as a regional? And it's a pity Chair Leader's gone, but maybe in 6 months' time, it's Chair Campbell for the regional council. So just remember, Malcolm, this should be, in my opinion, this should be a regional facility. And I just think if we can lift up, and I know Tauranga City have done their thing, and it's very much Tauranga centric, but when we've got big food waste facilities being built in Rotorua to convert food waste into energy and that sort of thing, maybe we should be looking to say, why doesn't the food waste be done at Rotorua? And when you look at the land between the railway line and Truman Lane, I don't know who owns that, but you could put in a rail facility where, but I'm thinking mainly of construction waste, particularly concrete. If you got all the crushed glass in there and the crushed concrete, that's an incredible material for roading substrate. It's being tried elsewhere around New Zealand. You know, this facility should be big enough to start thinking about those things. We import a lot of our gravel or our rock from outside of the Bay of Plenty. Here's a facility to recycle a lot of that and put a material back that goes on our roads. And I really congratulate you, Anne and Sam, for bringing this to the region, because I'm of the opinion this should be a regional facility funded across the region, because it's the regions. And I know when the industrial waste facility was closed at the back of Tauranga, the buildings that were being demolished in Wakatani ended up being mucked around with in Te Puna. So you know, there is a lot of regional stuff here, and I think we really need to make this a regional facility because it's got so much potential to do its thing. And I really congratulate you for bringing it to the Mayoral Forum and not just keeping it as a Tauranga City plan. So thanks, Anne.
Thanks, Gary. I think if we let Sam finish, we'll end up exactly there.
Yeah, but you already, my hard sell for this whole presentation you've already done for me, so that's good. Right? I can be a bit easier. So what's it?
Stevie,
Steve, lead you it.
Yes, just the only comment I'd agree with Gary there. We did try this 9 years ago, and it was when the waste minimisation bill came in, and we had a great. We thought the centre would be Kawerau actually, and but we couldn't get other mayors to agree. So that's why that failed. And at the moment, I support you, Gary. The food waste initiative at Rotorua is huge and is the ability to scale up for the region. So I would suggest not duplicating it in this proposal, because that is waste to energy and it includes all the agricultural waste. So that is absolutely vital that we capture that for the wider region. Thanks.
Thanks, Stevie. Keep going,
Yep.
Sam, and then we'll.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for that. Great points. So move away from the sheet there. That's just the same picture you've basically seen before. And so I'll pause on here just so you can see what it looks like, which is a lot nicer than it looks at the moment. But I think the real key talking points are that I guess initially in terms of the construction demolition stuff itself, we were again going back to that old total and looking at what the construction demolition waste was, and we were looking at maybe 5,000 tonnes a year. And so MFE gave us $20 million on that basis to convert 20,000 tonnes, which we were like, well, that's quite a lot. And then when we talked to MFE a little bit more when we came in, and I kind of said, well, actually, what's your expectation for the region? How much waste are we potentially not capturing in terms of construction and demolition? And their view from their surveys was 80,000 to 120,000. And so we were looking at 5,000, but across the region, there's potentially 120,000. And we appreciate that even with all the increases in terms of the waste levy and things like that, for a lot of providers, it's still going to be cheaper just to bury it underground. But I think, and from having talked to waste providers, and that's a big part of this, is as a collective of councils and regional council and things like that, is that we start talking to those waste providers, because I think a lot of them do want to do the right thing, but there's not the facilities to do it. And I think most of our councils at the moment, because of the way that the WMPs come up, either have recently or are going to put our WMPs or our waste bylaws out there, our waste management minimisation plans, sorry. And these are the type of things that we need to be talking about, is that, for example, the Tauranga City one has a requirement that in the future, building projects over probably 1 or 2 houses will need to submit a waste plan. But at the moment, we can't really tell building companies to do that when we don't have a facility that actually picks those types of things up. And so we thought, well, MFE is always going to say that, you know, there's heaps out there. So we talked to EnviroWaste, who has the lease on this, and we said, well, actually, if you're going to run this for us and we're going to build a C&D plant, what do you think you can get out of it? And so they went and they talked to a few other areas. And so, I mean, they talked to it, and so they said, well, we're comfortable to put it, to say that we'll definitely get 30,000, but we'll cater it so that it goes up to, so 30,000 tonnes, up to 40,000 tonnes, but then you can double shift that. So you can get 80,000 tonnes, and then you can triple shift that again if you really needed to. And so we said, well, that's great. So you're going to put your money where your mouth is, because obviously if you think that you can get this, are you going to be able to fund this? And so probably leads on to the final slide. This is a bit at the time, but we'll come back to that. In terms of the cost, so the overall cost is 40 million, and so we have monthly design reviews to make sure we're sticking with that, and we have a few nice to haves, like covering the recycling area and things like that, that, you know, if cost escalations happen, we can remove from the overall cost. And so MFE's already committed 20 million, but when we have the final design, we're going to push them harder, because, like I said, originally they funded us for 5,000, but we're looking at least 30 or 35,000 from the day that it opens. And yeah, so we said to EnviroWaste, well, actually, if this is such a good business case, are you going to put some money in it, or can we come up with an arrangement where you pay us more rent or something like that? And so, to our surprise, they said, yeah, we'll give you at least $5 million, but let us come back and talk to our board. And it's not as confidential anymore, because we've talked about this quite a bit in the open. So I realised that I'd used this slide before. So yeah, and so they're working on what the real business case looks like. And so as TCC, we had committed $9 million to it, but appreciated that was 9 million at the time when we were very total-centric, and it was probably just to catch up with what we were doing. But so in the long-term plan, and quite nicely said, we'll commit another 6 to it, but with the caveat that we're asking MFE for more money. We're also talking to TECT and other community funders, because particularly that education space, it's a really attractive thing. And because it's so high up, it also looks over the wastewater treatment plants and out, across everywhere really. So we think that's an attractive thing, and particularly in terms of having a skywalk, we can do the education side. We think that's quite attractive, and also the reason why we're here is that we think, because it's a regional facility, is that a discussion are we having about a regional rate or a way that we chip in and do these types of things. But I also think it's a discussion, and like was rightly pointed out in the questions that came before, about across everything we do in terms of the waste space, how we can do this regionally better. And this was one of MFE's key parts of this, is that they were really keen to stop funding lots of small things and start funding bigger regional facilities. And so even a great example is that they've provided lots of money for balers, which basically get plastics together tightly for plastic that goes around hay bales and all of those types of things, but there's no real facility for it to go to. There are some that they say to go to, but this is the type of facility that would be great. You could have those smaller facilities feeding into this. And hopefully it's not going overseas, because we don't really do that anymore. But if it got to the stage where actually we were creating valuable products, then the port's right there. And Gary rightly pointed out that the area of land that continues past the transfer station, that's all owned by Tauranga City Waters or Wastewaters. We kind of own it together, and that's a bit of a discussion that we're having about who's going to take it later. But besides that, that's the area that we're looking at. If we were to expand this area for other things, that's the perfect area that has land to do things like pulling apart houses. And we're talking with the central government and around housing about how you do apprenticeships and things, pulling apart houses or concrete crushing or all of those types of things. But again, that's in the future. I think this is probably, hopefully, the first step in us working a bit closer together. And I know Waikato's got a really good example. Their regional council leads their whole waste space. So we've got a meeting between the TAO, the Territorial Authorities Officers Forum, at TCC next Tuesday, which is really led by that Waikato area, and they've kind of taken us under their wing, but how we can do some of those things a bit better. So we're not, I guess, duplicating the effort, I suppose, and particularly with the changes central government's making, in my view, and that's just my view from reading the documents and having talked to the ministry, is that they are really looking at how we can do things better as a region. And it makes sense. Like, I know that when we deal with our waste companies, they need to get a waste license from us, and then one from Western Bay, and they get one from Whakatane, and they get one from Kawerau, and they get one from everywhere. And it's, even that's a massive duplication, particularly when you've got a small business. So, yeah, open to any questions.
Thanks, Sam. And I mean, that's the reason that I wanted to Sam to bring it here, is so that we can start having a discussion about,
so that we can start having a discussion about, we're heading down this track. I knew that Gary and Doug had talked to me about what's happening. We've got a lot of demolition going to be happening in Tauranga particularly, which is why we're so interested in it. But we're aware that other towns are also facing that. There is an opportunity for us here, and this is just the start of the discussion, really. That's the timeline for the project, and it's only I think when you look at what central government is doing, and look, it's only common sense that we should be getting that. If we're working together, we get the amount that you could do something with, rather than us all doing it individually. I come to Jane, because I know she's been patiently waiting.
Well, thank you. I'm really excited about this. As long as I've been in the regional council, we've talked about the need for a regional approach to waste and the desire for a regional waste strategy. And we have been talking to Waikato Regional Council about the approach. So this is really exciting. And I know I've had approaches from a number of construction companies saying, what do we do with our waste? We really want somewhere to put our construction waste. They operate up in Auckland and there's facilities up there and there's nothing down here. So kudos to you guys. You gave us assurances that it's scalable and able to take up to 80 or even more.
120.
120, yep, which is fabulous. The question I have is around, it's close to a very sensitive receiving area, and we do have climate change issues and a likely sea level increase with corresponding groundwater level increases. So how are you planning for that?
Yeah, great question, and that is an issue there, and that's probably the reason why we have that land all available there. And so that's part of the planning that we've been doing, is making sure that for at least the projections that we have for the next 100 years is that it's not going to get washed away or anything like that, and that it's fit for purpose. And to a certain extent, lots of these facilities are fine when there's quite a bit of groundwater. But also in terms of making sure that it doesn't leach through any of the things or take anything out. So that's probably a biggest part of the questions around cost has been that, and that's probably why we're at the stage to be a bit more comfortable around the cost, because doing ponds and all those types of things. This is a bit further in, but again, still very low lying. But those are the things we're working through. And one of the key parts of that we appreciate is the cultural significance of the area as well. A lot of that land previously has been reclaimed, and so that's a big part of what we're doing as well, is say, well, in our view, and the discussion that we're having is that this is the type of thing, and the early indications that we have had working with all our iwi partners, is that this is the type of thing that prevents things going into our whenua and polluting our whenua, and if anything, is something that helps do those things right. So we have some other issues in that space. We'll be doing some things. This is an area, early indications are that it's something that is beneficial for our environment, so something that we can definitely partner in, and particularly in terms of if we grow down a little bit, we'll definitely have to raise that land up in that space, but also that, in my view, is an opportunity for us to partner with local iwi as well, in terms of offering that land as an opportunity to for iwi investment and things like that too, if that's the direction that they want to go. So.
Malcolm.
Thanks, Sam. Great presentation, I have to say. And one question has been answered. Have you got enough land to expand? So that'll have a challenge for sure. But the other one for me is we talk about demolition of construction work, and that brings the A word into the discussion, asbestos. Is that facility going to be able to handle asbestos, and what are you going to plan on doing with it after you've handled it?
Yeah, and so that was also my question, because probably once a month I get someone calling me up on the phone abusing me that there's nowhere to take asbestos and total them. And so, that was one of our things, is that a facility that takes it to collect it, but also where it goes. So we're probably not at the stage of knowing exactly where it's going to go, but at the stage where there will be a space where we can say, it wouldn't go through that machine because it's going to contaminate everything else, but have a space where people can bring asbestos to, so that it can at least be stored there securely before it goes elsewhere. And I think behind the scenes they're working for all of these things where they're going to end up going, because as you can appreciate, they're not all going to go to one place, they're going to get shipped out all over the show. Yep.
Through the chair, just that we're quite conscious of this at present in Kawerau, because of having to transport is a huge issue. And what is concerning us, and we've been talking about a cell in Kaura for a collection area. What concerns us is that NIMBY issue. But the other thing that really is the big problem is the fact that we're transporting it through a number of districts to get to Waikato. And that also has some issues. So I think it's a big discussion that we need to do regionally wise. It's not going to go away, particularly with AC pipes in the ground, which are probably safer left in the ground, to be honest. And but fibre light is a big deal for us in Kaura, because a lot of our houses are built in the 50s and all over the country, actually, all with fibre light. And I can tell you now that the fibre light they used in the 50s does not burn. I can prove that. However, you can buy a fibre light now that disappears in front of your eyes. So there is definitely an issue with asbestos, and I think there's something we have to have a big discussion as to where we're going to put it. And to dump it in somebody else's backyard, yeah, great, it's out of sight, out of mind, but to get it there is an issue. And we're quite precious about bringing stuff into our rohi. I think we should be also conscious about exporting it out of our rohi too. So thank you for that, but great presentation. Chair, I just have to say that I seem to have left my wallet in the car, so I can't help you right now. So.
Funny that. I think the idea is though that we are trying to get more money out of MFE to start with, and perhaps it might be helpful if we had regional support. So one thing that we could do is we could put together a letter that we all contribute to. But the reason I brought it, I wanted Sam, the minute Sam presented this and the opportunity, I thought if we talk about it now, I know that we've all done budgets and things, so this year's really gone and we've got elections, but this is just the start. And I think once we get through the elections and we've got new councils, then I think this is an opportunity for us to regionally talk about how we manage waste on a regional basis. And it might not all come here, it may well be that we find different places, but we're actually managing it regionally. So that was the reason for it. I mean, I did say the extra 6 million. Well, we could look at a regional rate, but I don't think we're in a position to do that yet. I think we would want to have a more complete picture. The other alternative, because I've got to look after the Tauranga ratepayers, is that we give the Tauranga ratepayers a discount and everyone else pays a bit more. But let's see if we can get the money out of government first, because they're really quite excited about the possibilities here. And this is cutting edge, this is leading edge. When we talk about leading edge, this is certainly that. So what we might do, if you're happy, is put together a letter and then circulate that for everyone to contribute to. So at least they can see we started those regional conversations. Have I stolen your thunder? Is that what you were going to say?
No, that's perfect. Yeah, I was going to go to the money page, Sam. Yeah. I think you're having very encouraging conversations with MFE at the moment, and I think they're expecting a bid or a proposal that will see them pay more. And I think if we had regional support, I think that'd just be the encouragement they need.
Yeah, so I mean, they're probably in a good position because they've doubled last year, they doubled the waste levy money, so they now have twice the amount of money that they had last year, and then it goes up by another $10 this year. So by the end, it's about 3 or 4 times what they were getting before. So there's lots of money there, and they've set up a whole separate division now that's just looking at waste infrastructure investment. I just saw on LinkedIn or something that they were looking for a director of waste infrastructure investment or something. And so talking to them, they were, before we even presented at council, quite keen to really push us to have made a proposal, but we wanted to do it right and know what the money looked like and bring it to everyone first.
Gary.
Thanks, Chair. Sam, I think, this is a great first step, as I said earlier on. But I think when you got to the prices and it was looking like maybe we were short of funds, the first thing you did was remove the roof. And I would caution anyone against that. Wellington knows full well the pressures we are facing around the Mount area at the moment. And this is an ideal facility to be fully enclosed with negative pressures from day one. And I think if you take the story to Wellington of a regional facility, go out 50 years and say, what is waste minimisation going to look like 50 years out? And then do a whole of life analysis of the costs coming back. You are better to put the roof on day one and have a negative pressure facility to compete, or to overcome the negative or the pressures you'll get from the residential area when the wind blows, because it has smells with it and it has dust with it. And if you contain those at source, it's easier to do it from day one than trying to retrofit those as they're finding out in Christchurch at the moment. So I think this has to be a regional facility, because that's the way we have to do it going forward. And I seriously suggest you consider looking at that rail facility to either take stuff out to Hampton Downs, if that's where it's going to, and how stuff comes in, because you could have, an agreement with the Waikato that we'll do this bit, the Rotorua does the food waste, we do this bit, and it's more than a regional facility. It's a coordinated facility for the central North Island, where we could do something really smart and get funding from central government, because it's a big pilot. It's looking outside our square. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. That's helpful. Anything else, Aileen?
Used to those.
Could I have those in a quick? Can Marty, I wonder if you could circulate some technical information to the waste groups, because we've got people doing local solutions and they can either stop doing that and start inputting into this or something like that.
Yes, certainly. And I think at that point, this might be an opportunity, Sam, for you to pull all the various staff working in waste sustainability across the region together and have this conversation. So if that hasn't already happened.
Yeah, it has to a lesser extent, but that was going to be the kind of the thrust from today. So a few of the waste people contact me during the week saying that, what are you presenting on and what's going on? Because I think lots of the staff are quite keen to collaborate in this space, and so it's kind of getting a sense from the governance level that we're on the same page. So yeah, there'll definitely be an action moving forward.
I just think it's really exciting, but I just wondered about, from our perspective, one of the issues that is a very real issue, not to mention by a ratepayers, but affordability. We're a big red blob on the deprivation index, and so therefore the system itself sounds, all the options that have been put up sound great. But if we were so far away that the costs for us to get there were more than we could have done it locally, that would start to become a challenging issue. So I'm just aware that some of us have that additional considerations in bigger numbers than others. So I just want to be, also we're a very big region. We're the 4th biggest region in New Zealand in the Whakatane District Council. So getting all that service to mean something for the whole of our area would be challenging.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and that's some discussions that I have been having with my colleagues around different councils, is that, in my opinion, Christchurch or Canterbury does it really well, is that they do everything in a coordinated response, but they have kind of a set rate. So yeah, if you are in a district that actually it takes a long way to come in, that probably those that are in Christchurch pay slightly more, just so that it's equitable for everybody. Because I mean, overall, we're not going to solve these environmental issues if we focus on the fact that actually we can do it really cheap in total, because we've got lots of residents and we've got a relatively small land area. We're only going to solve it if we resolve things that are far away. And so I think that's probably the next step, is that when we're looking at those regional waste plans, whatever we're going to call them, is that we take those types of things into consideration, and that we start to say that actually maybe, Tauranga residents pay a couple of dollars more to make sure that it's not, $30 or $40 more expensive for someone who's in Kawerau or Whakatane or wherever. But yeah, great point. Thank you.
And that's the beauty of a regional rate. And if you look at Saxon Field and Nelson, that's exactly what they did. So they worked out what the distances were, and you paid less. The further away you were, the less you paid towards the ongoing costs. And so eventually a regional rate, I think, would give us the most flexibility and the most equity can be built into that, rather than us trying to fiddle with it. But yeah. Gary, is that a new hand or an old hand?
No, it's
I
not.
know you're an old hand, but
It's a new hand. I'm mindful of, the conversations 9 years ago, and my first attempt, or 6 years ago, at getting a regional view from the Mayoral Forum. Hear your words, Judy, but if you weren't able to send all your waste to Hampton Downs and Hamilton, what's the cost of you building your own landfill? And that's where I think, look out 50 years, the world is going to change. And let's look at the lowest cost option now across the district. And I'm just mindful, and we talk about this a lot. Is it time we had a resolution? Because if you just leave it, Sam, you need to go and have a talk to a few fellas around town and see if you can get them to join on board. That puts the onus on Sam. Are we, as a bunch of mayors, committed to this project where, and I'm quite happy to move, that we instruct Sam to talk to the other councils within the region, but also maybe the Waikato, to get a better view of where we're going in the future, to take a better story to Wellington.
so you're proposing a motion that we actually liaise with all the local councils to develop a regional waste strategy.
Absolutely.
Waste strategy.
Yes.
And can I come in here? Just
Sure.
to mention, I like Gary's idea. This is what we attempted to do, but I don't think we had the incentive right then for minimisation of waste. My concern, and the only concern, I think, a fabulous concept design, and I agree that some components may not have to be incorporated, but I see iwi engagement after concept design. And listening to Jane and knowing our issues with wastewater, it is absolutely critical that mana whenua are involved in the concept design, or else it could come unstuck, especially when MFE looks at it, and if iwi express discontent about sensitive areas, potential leachate and things like that, will come unstuck for a very good idea. So I do think whether it's at the Plenty Regional Council, we would have a view too from our lessons learned. I think the concept design has to include mana whenua, not engagement afterwards. And I think this is forward thinking, and congratulate you.
Yeah, thanks for that. And that probably isn't included. So in terms of the concept design, we were engaging with mana whenua and specifically in that area. And then in terms of the consents, I think we just highlighted that there's probably the formal sign-off process in terms of a consent, but particularly if we were doing a regional approach, I think it would be really key, particularly the issues around waste crossing boundaries is a massive issue. But it's an issue that affects different iwi and hapu groups separately. So some iwi and hapu groups not are fine with it. That sounds like that's the wrong word, but I guess are more opposed to it than others. So that definitely, if we're looking at the regionals space, we'll definitely have to have them in the room with us too.
All right. So Gary, you're moving that. Are we happy that it's Sam, or do we?
just the staff, yeah.
Staff.
Of our council. Yeah, work together to develop a regional waste strategy. Is someone prepared to second that? Malcolm, thank you.
Can I just ask that does include regional council staff?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Because they'll be paying the bill, Anne.
We do have a regional infrastructure rate,
Yes.
that's going to be on our books that will be available, for use in the future.
I've spotted that.
Chair, can I just make a comment too, that Gary is right. We did have this discussion, and I actually remember that very day, Gary, and as particularly at the Te Puke Golf Course. And I hope we're not here in 9 more years' time talking about the same thing. I don't think it's I think the environment is at that point now, or the government is going to push this as much as possible. But yeah, I look forward to a report back from Sam and where to from here, but let's not be here 9 years' time doing the same thing. Thank you.
I won't be here in 9 years' time.
Okay, so I'll put that motion then. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Thanks very much. Thank you, Sam. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, so we're running a bit behind time, but let's press on. The Hautaki Harbour update. Lynn. Yeah, Lynn.
Wherever you're comfortable.
Or I can bring up the notes.
I'll bring it. I've never used it. It's always a learning curve.
I can run it from here if you prefer.
Put the arrow that looks to the right, yes. Well, thank you for the opportunity to have a bit of an update. It's quite exciting. We're getting weekly photos of the advancement of the harbour structure since the beginning of this year, which is just fabulous. We tend to share those on our council Facebook. This is one of New Zealand's largest non-roading infrastructure projects. It's to re-establish the Opotiki Harbour for commercial vessels, mainly mussel barges, but there will be a lot of opportunity for different shipping to go in through there. It's a $100 million redevelopment and to build the 2 training walls. We seem to be speeding through here. This is it's been built for commercial use, and it's based on a dream from the Whakatoia iwi of their interest. Can we go back?
Yeah, so what I'm gonna do, so
You must have one of those rolling speed things.
Okay, sorry.
It's just rolling on through.
Oh, is that what I was doing? Right. Sorry. I thought, oh, I'm not up to it.
I promise I didn't do it.
No.
it's moving faster than the trucks delivering that.
Yes.
I'll just try to run it from the see if it uses this one.
Thank you. I'm sure we all realise that the Opotiki District Council worked on this infrastructure because of Whakatoia's want to farm the sea. Having farmed the land, they were great market gardeners way back in the days and had a lot of trading ships which went as far as Sydney. come the confiscations and trying to redress that, it's an opportunity for them to move elsewhere. So this is the reason that we are moving towards the harbour walls. The dark pink area is the one already in existence with the mussel ropes in it. It's moving quickly again.
And it's the setting behind it, and I've got to take it off, and it has a timer on it.
Okay, I'll talk really fast. We'll make this a 2020 picture thing, shall we? So this.
I'll take it off for a minute.
That's right.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to go. Just a second.
Probably you want to keep talking and probably just
Yes.
run it without hitting your phone.
Yeah.
Just,
Click it on when it's small and then it won't go through.
So aquaculture is a new industry for the Opotiki district, and fits in perfectly with the regional aquaculture strategy as well as the government's. Funding has been such that it's actually progressed the speed of what's happening in our aquaculture area. We're well in advance of, for instance, at the mussel factory, we're well in advance of the growth of that place because of funding opportunities that have come through from various government grants over the last little while.
it's like 3 or 4.
3, please. That's it. Next one. Thank you. Thank you. This was actually our first conceptual image of the harbour, done quite some years ago now. It's quite remarkable that it's beginning to really look like that too. When it's completed, it'll bring many benefits locally and regionally, including our aquaculture industry will begin to flourish. And I fully believe it's a tribute to what can be achieved through genuine partnership with iwi, with government and with the regional council. We've had a lot of interested parties put in funding right from the beginning that has enabled this to happen. Could I have the next slide, please? This shows us an overview of, to the bottom right-hand corner is where our own little Opotiki wharf is. At the moment, as you're looking at the harbour production and the rock pile areas to the right, we've got the walls going up, but the area to the left on the other side of the river is the marine industrial area, which we put into our district plan in 2016 to enable everything to happen at the right time in the right places. Move on to the next one, thank you. The eastern and western sea walls. Contractors came on site in September. They've begun the construction. They've actually completed the length, but they're just doing the width and the height now. So there's a lot of slight changes in how they went about it after all of the testing and so on. But they are building both walls at the same time, alternating between rock placement, the sheet piling, and compaction. And the actual physical walls should be finished by December 2022, this year. If we go to the harbour timeline, dredging starts very shortly, bringing the machine in, and dredging has to take place for a good year or so before they will begin to open up the area between the walls and close the old river mouth. Thanks. Next picture. This is actually from January of this year, so lots happened since that time. And the next picture shows us what it looked like in April. So I think that really demonstrates, if you can imagine that the actual river mouth is to the right of the picture you're looking at, quite a way west. And most boats can use it, 2 hours either side of high tide. And what will happen is once they've dredged from our wharf back towards the harbour walls, they get to this bit in between the two walls, and then all of that gets moved across to create a huge sand dune that then closes off the river mouth to create the, I think it's 4 metre deep, mostly, channel right through the middle and back towards the land. Next slide. Yes, our harbour uses a lot of rock.
We're all finding you're taking all the rock.
Yes. However, if we move on to the next one, we do have rock supplies from all over the Bay of Plenty, but what has happened is we've reopened a couple of quarries and a couple of new ones have come on board. And I think this is actually really important because it does create a rock supply market for the Bay of Plenty for all of the roading and other construction, etc. We've had, at the moment, we've had over 300,000 tonnes of rock delivered, which is about 80% of what's needed. And you can see there how far away the rock is coming. But to actually create a couple of new quarries has been a big, actually a really big tick for this side event that actually has a lot of value for our region. Okay. This slide shows the handbar production on site. The actual cast for the handbars, the smallest ones are 2.5 tonnes, and the biggest ones are 50 tonnes. The cast, the moulds, were made at our local engineering firm, and they do 2 pours a day. The first one's at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they create whichever ones they're onto at the time, and then take those apart, move them away, and do another one that's then sitting overnight. And I think 90% of the handbars have also been produced. So they're stockpiling. All right, some of the challenges. Moving on. I'd actually like Aileen to talk a little bit about this because she has been front and centre of quite a bit of this. We've had archaeological appeals and 2 court cases, and we're also protecting the future ability of the harbour to be properly operated and maintained in the High Court around the Macca claims. Do you like to? No? Okay. Okay. No, too much detail. And dredging of the river will entail some restrictions to the harbour access over the second half of 2022. Consultation with Coast Guard and fisher people have already gone ahead. So that covers, we have had a few problems with COVID, but we seem to be moving through that. Next slide, please. One of the great things about a lot of the work that's done through Opotiki District Council is the social procurement parts of our contracts. And these lovely young men, I had in our council chambers for morning tea at one stage. We have concentrated on local employment as far as we can, and we have created 300 new jobs in the district, with a very high proportion of those being locals. For instance, 80% of the employees, which is over the 200 mark now, at Whakatoia Mussels are locals, and 50% directly involved in the harbour construction are locals. We have these young men pictured in the slide are actually new apprentices with HEB. They've been trained, and I think that we're up to about 4 fully trained in apprenticeships there. And we've also have 5 cadets in council. We did have 6, but 1 was stolen by HEB because he was doing so well in that engineering side of things. Thank you. Next slide. The thing that has happened is that things have really all of our businesses, I'd say, are growing. There's a huge number of new apprentices across the trades. We have quite a lot of investment in new facilities for local businesses, trucking companies, our kiwi fruit storage areas, the mussel factory. And the amazing thing is that the weekly spend in Ropotiki has been topping the last 2 years and continues to be above the national trend. So the money in our district, with all of the construction and the new jobs, etc., is really making a huge difference for our area, as we knew it would. These 2 lads work, they're apprentices for with Hayes Engineering. Sure I got that right. Okay, next slide. Processing plant. If you haven't had the opportunity to have a tour of this at some time, that must be arranged. It's quite amazing. They can produce 45 to 50 tonnes a day of mussels for national and international distribution. I was just saying before, they are actually shipping mussels, our mussels, Whakatoia mussels, to Malaysia, Vietnam. The USA is one of our biggest markets at the moment. But they're also processing mussels brought in from other places. At the moment, Coromandel, so on. In conclusion, Bay Trust were the first organisation to actually help with funding on the feasibility of the harbour way back, and the regional council finally okayed their fantastic infrastructure fund grant of 20 million back in 2014. Sorry? 13. So, you know, there's been 5 business cases. So that's quite a few no's as we move forward. And we're completely past the halfway mark of this actually happening. The partners in this are the government through Kanoa, Crown Holdings Limited, Ropotiki District Council, the Regional Council, and Whakatoia iwi. And we think we're about 60% fully completed. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Well, it's a dream come true, really, isn't it? It is. Any questions?
And could I just comment? I want to congratulate you, Lynn and Eileen. It's fantastic. And remembering John Forbes, he walked the corridors of power for 20 years ago with this dream. And I think any government at that stage was not able to put it together like it has come together, but it's a wonderful, an amazing initiative for Opotiki and the coast and the people. So congratulations, it's amazing.
Thank you, Mayor Steve. A lot of people involved in the project through the years, but I would say that Mayor John and Aileen would be the top two on my list of people who have contributed the most to the people of Opotiki for this.
Can I just make a comment? Lynn, thank you for that presentation. It's nice to be brought up to date once again. We've missed John's weekly presentation. In fact, it got to the point where most of us were saying, oh, not those bloody muscles anymore, for God's sake. So it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing that's happened to Opotiki. And as I say, I'd just like to acknowledge John's tenacity and resilience of getting knocked back and picking himself up. And we had many talks on the sidelines about people that were knocking the whole system, the whole project. And so it was, but it's nice to be brought up to scratch. Looking forward to a feed of those muscles when we come down and have a look. And best of luck to you. Well done.
Okay, what I think we should do is break for morning tea. We are running seriously late because we should have had the update on reforms, but we might speed it up a bit afterwards. But I think we've been sitting for long enough. We'll take a break now and have morning tea. Got Ezra Schuster. Thank you. We've got Ezra Schuster on the line, so I think we'll bring him up ahead of Aileen if Aileen doesn't mind. Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me, Ezra? Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Tolley. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Nice to see you.
You too. You too. Shall we just rock into it, Commissioner?
Thank you.
I will. I've just got a presentation here, but I appreciate too your time, so we'll just try to get through some of the key things in the presentation. But before I kick off, can I just acknowledge I thank all of you for your leadership over this particularly difficult time, and also just want to introduce my colleague Jackie Rollston-Steed, who's come on board. We've borrowed her from the regional council. She conded over to support this mahi as well as our newly minted interim co-chair Fiona McTavish, who's come on board as the co-chair for the regional leadership group in place of Andy McGregor, who retired a few weeks ago. But also want to also acknowledge, I know Jeff and Russell, Jeff Williams, that is, from Rotorua Council, and Russell, who's been an integral part of our rethinking about the regional leadership group. Commissioner, what I will do is that I've got a number of slides here. I thought it would be paid just to, obviously the purpose is to give you a bit of an update as to the Wairiki Bay Plenty Regional Leadership Group. I thought all I'll do is just go through just very quickly, just to provide a bit of context, because it's been a while since we've connected, a bit of context as to the public service role and the function, and then really get to the purpose really, which is around where we sit currently as a Wairiki Bay Plenty Regional Leadership Group. And I might tag team with Jackie at some point just to pick up some of the feedback that we've had over the last little while. So listen, I just this is a presentation I've put together for regional public service commissioners up and down the motu anyway, but really quickly, many of us will understand this anyway, but I just really wanted to ground us as to why the role of the regional public service commissioner, and why are we doing what we are doing across the public service as well. And there's probably those 5 key points, but I think which, you know, you could, and I'll ensure that I send this through to Tony and the team for the presentation, but there's a couple of key things I just really want to note here as to the why, because I think that's really important as well. If anything, COVID has taught us is that if we do things together, we're a lot more effective. Secondly, is that inequity and disparity that we have, particularly for Māori and Pacific, but particularly for Māori and across our rohe, if anything, COVID has perpetuated that. This third point here, I think is probably the most critical element as well, and it's really come to the surface over the last 6 months, and certainly the workshops that we have had with the group. If there's anything COVID has taught us, but more importantly, I think we've always known this, is that communities know their communities best. Iwi and Māori groups, particularly local government businesses, they know what the realities of the communities are. And I do know that, you know, when we first talked about the role of the Public Service Commissioner, there was a tagline that we used nationally, which is about powering up the regions. Well, I think what's really critical here, that this isn't about necessarily powering up the regions, it's about powering up local communities. So the strength of local communities, local place-based leadership, I think, if anything, has really come to the fore, and how critical that is as well. Obviously, the two other whys is that, you know, a clear message too is that people want a unified public service, acting collaboratively around communities, not necessarily what our priorities are, but what communities need. And the fifth why, which is probably the most boring out of the whys, but I think a critical part is that this is part of the mandate that Cabinet gave, probably as part of the public service reforms. So that's part of the why. The core principles of here, yes, again, would seem quite straightforward, but I think really, really important is that, you know, is that spirit of service, is that actually we all are drawn to the public service because of that notion of tautua, to serve your community, partnering with Māori. And so I heard our Mayor from Opotiki talking about the relationship with whakatohi and so forth. And I think that's a critical element as well. And again, that unified public service element. Just moving fairly quickly here, but listen, there's probably three key things in the mandate of the Public Service Commissioner, which is really drawn from the Regional Public Service Leadership Framework that was put in place as part of the reforms. And I think this is really important, is that my function, and I see my colleague Darren Toy here from Kāinga Order as well, and it's great the work that Darren and the team are doing as well, is that the role of the Public Service Commissioner isn't necessarily to wave a big stick and tell what the other government agencies to do, or to filter through the work that they're currently doing. If anything, what we do want to bring is a sense of order, a cohesion, and collaboration. And so there's three key elements of that as part of the Public Service Leadership Framework. One is that this function, and supported by Jackie and a few of the others, is to convene, to bring together regional leaders, and if anything, local leaders across those different sectors, bring together really that really important leadership. Secondly, is to, as much as possible, is to resolve those local issues at a local level. When we cannot resolve those things, then it's about using this function and this group to escalate things to the centre. And we all, I think if there's anything that we understand, particularly around central government, is that there are a whole lot of different side doors, whole different points of interaction. But what we want to do is provide a point of escalation as much as possible around ensuring that local issues are driven straight from that local leadership through to the centre as well. Probably alongside that, so those are the three key features of that leadership framework. There's 11 of us appointed, as you'll probably be aware, that the mandate of the Public Service Commissioners and the function of this group has probably, if anything, strengthened over the last 6 months because of the COVID protection framework. So the role took a really strong, with the regional leadership groups, took a really strong role convening, bringing together leadership around supporting COVID care in the community, which has been, if anything, I think one of the great successes, I think, of us as a country, is about how we sort of came together, not only as a public service, but particularly with iwi, local government and others and providers supporting whānau that needed to isolate safely. So 11 of us appointed nationally. These 2 points here I think is really important as well, is that we've got a designated, what they call system leader for the regional public service, and that's Debbie Power. So she is the MSD or the Secretary for Social Development, or the MSD Chief Executive. She convenes all the regional, the Chief Executives across the public service in order to support the function that I play. And at a DCE level, a Deputy Chief Executive level, we've got Viv Rickard, who again, on behalf of the CEs, brings that together as well. And so, yes, that's if anything, those two elements have been really strengthened over COVID, but it's an approach, I think, of chief executives coming together, thinking about actually what makes good sense in a region, or more importantly, locally. We're hoping that that's a model that continues beyond COVID. Again, I'll just run through this really quickly, very, very similar to the above. I think one of the key things here, though, is that, as you probably note, this isn't just about bringing together public servants across the country. This is actually bringing together leadership across the motu as well, and particularly across Aotearoa. So the interagency collaboration, including local government and all of this as well, is probably really, really critical. Probably at the heart of that, though, is how do we ensure that we as government agencies are working in formation to support iwi Māori, Pacific and community needs and priorities as well. There's a list of different things here, and I won't go through them individually, but it just gives you a sense of sort of the breadth of mahi that's currently sitting across the public service. This isn't all of what we do across the motu and across the rohe, but it just gives you a bit of a sense of the breadth of some of the key big priorities. Some of this has developed even further, but you could get a sense of just the breadth of the mahi happening across the public service as well. And so one of the, up until December, was myself and Dominic Lepper, who was from the MSD, who I'd managed to second over for the MSD to support this role. But fortunately, through MSD, we've been able to secure 4 fixed-term staff, FTE, to support myself doing this role as well. So Jackie's one of them. I've also been able to bring on board Steve Groom, who was the General Manager for Oranga Tamariki, to be able to support this mahi. Dominic, obviously, from MSD. And we're in the final stages of appointing someone else. So it just gives you a bit of a sense of what we need to do here in this space. This gives you across the motu, and gives you a sense of who's been appointed in these roles as well. That sets a bit of context, and I just really want to move now to, more importantly, I think, the purpose of this kōrero was around the role of the Wariki Bay Plenty Regional Leadership Group. And can I just say too that that this has been a bit of a journey, and you know, as many of you recall, our attempt to bring together regional leadership, particularly centred around central government pre-COVID, I think we had clear feedback is that on one level that was it was important, but there was a couple of key missing elements in that approach. Firstly is the important role of local government, and your role in terms of being able to, I was going to say conjoint, but you're more than that. You know, that you give life to local voices, local communities in that space. And secondly, another missing element to this was around the importance of mana whenua and iwi Māori within that space as well as other communities like Pasifika. And so we've been on a bit of a journey rethinking about how we operate things. However, there were a couple of key things, and I mentioned earlier on is that, you know, the line from the centre was that, you know, the role of the Public Service Commission, the role of the reforms was to power up the region. What's become quite clear is that the role of this function is to power up local communities. Yes, the region has a part to play, but also it's about the importance of our local communities. And so I do want to acknowledge Taparoto Nicholson, who at the end of last year, together with Jeff and our Te Arawa colleagues, gifted us this concept of the Te Waka Haurua analogy of actually that the region is our construct as government, that rather than thinking about the region as being something that government agencies or councils or providers determine what their boundaries are, that we look at something a lot more befitting of Wairiki Te Mana Nui a Toi, and that is that we have a waka haurua approach. So rather than us thinking about the Bay Plenty Wairiki, that we consider and think about our region as two waka, that we use Te Arawa as the approach, and on the other side of Mātātua. And so without going through too much of the detail of here of this diagram, and again, Te Poroto and Karen Verco really played an integral part in sort of bringing our thinking together, is rather than us thinking about actually having a regional leadership group that speaks for the whole region, because that's not the case, is that we operate and we define ourselves based on mana whenua boundaries, or those waka type of boundaries as well. And so, you know, a lot more others will eloquently be able to describe this, but we felt it was a really important, I think, epiphany in many ways, because in many, for agencies, we define ourselves by boundaries gifted to us, and our boundaries don't align. You know, if I think about, you know, currently I'm with health, but if you think about education, MSD, police, oranga tamariki and so forth, none of our boundaries align. If you even think about the DHBs, that we trip over each other all the time, but landing with a waka approach seemed to make really good sense as well. So I just really want to, so that's been an important concept of organising ourselves in this approach. And so the question is, so what does that mean for us as a regional leadership group? A couple of months ago, and thanks to Fiona and the Regional Council, we were able to have Rawiri Bana, who facilitated a series of workshops together with the members of the regional leadership group as we were, I won't say we were coming out of COVID, but as we moved to the next phase of the response, is thinking about what have we learnt around over the last few years trying to organise ourselves as a regional leadership group. And there are a couple of key things I really want to share with you. And I don't want to throw Jackie under the bus here, or throw Jackie in the bus, but I don't want to surprise Jackie here, but her and I just might tag team. Through those series of workshops, we were able to get some fantastic, really rich feedback and quite honest feedback from the team as to actually resetting actually what the purpose of the regional leadership group was. And Jackie, I might just hit on the purpose here and then maybe get you to talk about some of the people elements of it as well. But, you know, people are really clear that the regional leadership group, it's not a decision-making body. Well, firstly, that they really endorsed the waka approach, that people really saw that actually, in order to give life to local issues, local leadership issues, organising it in waka just made really good sense. That way it stops agencies from determining whose patches who. So that's probably the key takeout. But really it was about really thinking about what our purpose is that the purpose of the regional leadership group is to provide that eyesight, provide that coordination, really that cohesion at that regional and local level. Secondly, it was about how do we resolve issues that enable opportunities at that waka level. So, you know, the role of this function, and Jackie and myself and the team, is to provide advice, intel and support directly to our waka, so they can make really informed decisions as to where investments need to be around resourcing or even advice. Third, I think what was really clear was people really agreed that collective regional voice to escalate issues. There will be some issues that across the whole rohe, the Whanganui, Toi and Wairiki, that are relevant for all of us, but there will be many issues that will be relevant to specific communities. So people agreed around that collectivism across the region, but also more importantly about ensuring that there's a really good, strong collective voice at that real local level as well. Jackie, do you want to just talk to the people element of that? Oh, you're on mute, Jackie, sorry.
And here I thought I was clever and had hit the unmute. Tēnā tātou, ka nui te mihi ki a koutou I ngā rōpū Mayoral Forum. He mihi hoki ki a koe e te Mārekura, Commissioner Tolley, and a big mihi to Sarah and the Plenty Regional Council kai whakahaere. Tēnā koutou, ko Jackie Rolliston Steve tēnā. So as Ezra said, I'm currently in a secondment role from the Plenty Regional Council. And local government is one of the portfolios that I'm supporting Ezra within the RRG, hence the reason why I'm sitting at the table today. So Ezra's given a really good segue as to what the kaupapa, what the workshops look like. So maybe just to provide a little bit more clarification, around the RRG model or the structure is we've actually got two slides, this slide and the next slide, which I'd say are synonymous with each other. This overarching regional leadership group is comprised of various members from the two waka that Ezra already spoke to, as well as a number of government agencies and TLAs. So this information's actually come from that higher level group, and then the subsequent slide is from the workshops that were facilitated with Mātātua. And the only reason why I bring that up now is because much of what you're seeing on this first page resonates really well with the next slide. So we probably may not have to repeat what you see on the next slide. Yeah, except it's more at a grassroots level, and then that got brought up to this high level. So with regards to the people, that was the subsequent workshop. So we run a purpose workshop and then another workshop to talk about people. So what does membership look like? Who are our enduring parties? Who are our strategic partners and those who are working in this space? So iwi were obviously, you know, top of the list of who hold the space, and that they could hold the space that is meaningful for them. As Ezra also mentioned, that it would be waka led, so locally led, and I saw a pātai in the chat around, my assumption is that it was assumed that health dictated what that split looked like. No, it was iwi. They defined that that their rohi for the Bay of Plenty was by waka. So yes, the iwi are the enduring party, and so they set the priorities and the membership. So again, this all enhances what locally led leadership might look like, particularly from an iwi Māori perspective. And then in conjunction with that, depending on the priorities, so as we move out of that immediate COVID response, which was where RRG was originally set up, was it to help address COVID response. As they're moving out of response and more into a recovery/resilience phase, it's really important that we start addressing what some of the priorities are outside of COVID. And so the agencies that may be involved will be those who essentially can help maneuver or support what those priorities are for iwi and for communities. But again, just also being mindful that we need to retain some eyesight on COVID because we're not out of the woods yet.
Thanks, thanks, Jackie. I just really want to touch on some of the issues and concerns because I'm really quite keen maybe to hear your feedback on this as well. And so, listen, I think we've canvassed it enough, and I think, you know, that the issues and concerns, I think, was really quite critical. Was around, you know, how can the both waka work together? And I think we've got to a point where it's become quite clear that although there are some issues at both waka that are similar across both, they're also quite distinctive as well. And so, you know, I think there's a real appetite for, rather than thinking about a regional leadership group, which is again our construct, that we consider the other option, which is actually that we have all intents and purposes two regional leadership groups that really focus on that local leadership and the role of local government and iwi in that space as well. We talked about those priorities. People talked about those current relationships. They don't want to break some of those mechanisms in place. So there's been some really good mahi been established and really good work happening with agencies together with partners. And so we just really wanted to ensure that we didn't break any of those things. If anything, we wanted to build on them as well. And we also had that real question is actually what does success look like? And again, what became really clear is that what success might look like across the whole rohe might not be success for a particular locality. And so that nuanced about making sure that we understand it as well. You'll see the other part there, which is the working well and the opportunities. If there's anything, if I can summarize it, there are three key things that really came out of that workshop. And I'll go to our last slide then, which is that just have that up there to read. I think there are three key messages that I think that I heard directly from those two workshops. Obviously a real appetite to work across our waka to really support and boost up local leadership. So a model that's based on local leadership to enable regionally that is supported nationally. So that's that whole locally led, regionally enabled, nationally supported, where we can work together. Secondly, clear message from the group, and both waka, both local government and iwi as well, sort of saying that they needed a connected and cohesive public service. That people don't mind the 10 cars down the driveway, but they want to ensure that the people in those 10 cars are connected to each other and they're talking with each other. So that notion of flying in formation, collaborative public service as best we can. So rather than you dealing with individual agencies on a particular issue, that we'd like to work out how we operate that in a more cohesive way. And probably the third element of that as well is that the public service will be a hell of a lot more coherent and transparent in how we respond to local communities in iwi. And that includes sharing of data, information and resourcing as well. On that note too, one of the things that I have done, or the team have done to support me in this as well, is that over the last week or so, I've written to all the government agencies right across our region, as well as government agencies who might not have a physical footprint here in the region, but written to them, relaying those three key messages that, we've got a clear mandate, clear message from our regional leadership group that is that they are around that locally led approach. Secondly, that they want us to be cohesive. They want us to be connected. And so I'm going to use, my goal is over the next 3 to 6 months really, is to ensure that our regional agencies are working in unison, making sure that we're better connected with each other as well. And that's not to take anything away from what others are doing. If anything, again, that we want to build and develop that. And that, and also just I've conveyed to our agencies as well as that, how critical it is that we are as transparent and cohesive in working with our communities as well. So I might pause there, Commissioner Tolley, and because I understand, I think our Rotorua colleagues have got their hand up.
Yeah, so thank you, Ezra. Look, we are running on a complete failure today, so we are running really late. Appreciate your presentation. I'm just going to allow maybe 5 minutes of discussion with you, and then we do have to move on so that we get through the agenda. So Stevie, you've got your hand up.
I'll be very quick. I love your analogy of the waka. I think that speaks 1,000 words for our whole district, our wider district. And I like the working together. One of the propositions that we feel is emerging post-COVID that is very obvious that we need a community leadership group around to support what you're doing is the impact of poverty that we're seeing burst out post-COVID, family violence, community safety, community wellbeing. And we've mentioned to Minister Puttle-Williams that we'd love to set up our own community development approach to that with leadership from yourselves. That would be hugely helpful. Thanks, Ezra. We need all the might we can get.
Thanks, Stevie. Any other comments from anyone? Any questions for, Steve?
Kia ora, Anne. Kia ora, Ezra and Jackie. Me nui kia korua, thank you for your presentation. And I just want to acknowledge my colleagues, Jeff, Russell and Fiona, who've obviously been really involved in your group. And I was just looking at the slide, Ezra, of your 4 different elements. And I guess just wondering, what I think has been demonstrated through local government through COVID is our ability to stretch and bend and flexi and be adaptive to implement the 4 wellbeings, which are obviously we're empowered to through our legislation to focus on. And that's always been a point of contention. Are we about roads and pipes, or are we actually doing the full suite of wellbeings? And I think about what Aileen did with her group. I think about, we put staff into one of our social service agencies because they got hit. And I guess I'm just looking for my question is, how is the recognition of local government and its extensive networks and ability to move into the community through both leadership and doing, recognised in this model? And why that's important for me is that central government acknowledging that, particularly as we go through our reforms, and what the future is of local government. I think we've just demonstrated some of the extraordinary outcomes we can achieve in our communities when we partner, but when we really flexi. So Ezra, what does that mean to you as a central government rep? And do you think that's reflected in those points well enough?
Thank you, Steph. And listen, great question. My very short answer to that is that absolutely, I think none of us can do this, particularly central government, without the support of the local leadership that local government plays and the extensive networks that you have into communities. I know I've had a more recent conversation with Jeff about, some of the stuff that Mayor Chadwick was talking about and across Rotorua and just how critical that is. And so, Steph, if it isn't explicit in our approach, we will make it explicit, because I think the only way we could tackle some of these real big well-being issues. And by the way, sorry, I forgot to mention, Commissioner Tolley, that actually those three things that emerged from that workshop actually that was considered the big issues that everyone agreed upon. One was mental health and well-being. Secondly was the importance of engaging the rangatahi, because that's where the economic potential is. And third, it's about ensuring that that we give people meaningful mahi as well. So I think, Steph, my short answer is that absolutely has to be front and centre. And if it isn't explicit in there, I'm really happy to discuss about how do we ensure that we capture, I think, the important role that local government plays and the extensive networks that you have.
Thank you, Commissioner Tolley.
Anything else? Thank you very much, Ezra and Jackie. Excellent presentation. Thank you. You're going to make those slides available to us. Did you say? Yeah, lovely.
Yes,
and thank you for being so patient with the timing. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay,
so I think if we just take a little bit of time around the RMA, and then probably the other reports will take us read. But Amy, we come to you on RMA. Is everyone comfortable that we keep pushing on through?
Yes.
So I've got 9 slides, but I'm happy to speed it up if you're wanting to get to lunch faster. We'll take some time.
I'm conscious that we're all very busy people and people have got to travel and
Yeah, so happy to take your guidance on exactly what you want to hear about.
Go for it. Go through your slides.
Okay, so some of you may have heard at zone 2, in the while driving, you might.
Well, I can some of us here at Andy's view well, so we're really pleased to see this.
Right. Okay, so I imagine there's probably differing levels of understanding about the reforms in the room too. So please forgive me if I go too high level on it. So our Resource Management Act, we all know that's being taken apart and replaced with 3 pieces of legislation. I've been an RMA geek since basically I was a teenager, and every single amendment to the RMA made it a little bit fatter. And it started out a really nice little slim document, and now it's so fat they can't possibly add any more to it, so it's been broken into 3. That's a bit cynical because it's also adding some pieces into it that weren't there. So the Randerson review that you would have all received as a Christmas present from the Minister in 2019,
Yes.
all 553 pages that presumably you all read in your Christmas break. So that's setting the blueprint or the recommendations that underpin the reform objectives, all good objectives there: protecting and restoring the environment, better enabling development within limits, giving proper recognition to Te Tiriti, better preparing for climate change, and improving system efficiency and effectiveness, and reducing complexity. So looking through those, there's some very, very obvious tensions between those different reform objectives. So the local government RE reform steering group was put together, and this was one of the outcomes from the 3 waters agreement that local government New Zealand has with the Crown, and that provided for various other mechanisms of local government interfacing with central government. So, it's co-chaired by me, Toby Adams from Hauraki, and Janine Smith from NFE, and I have to say they're doing a fabulous job. Janine has been absolutely outstanding in that role, and I'm really enjoying working with both of them. On that group, we have various mayors, chairs, CEs, LGNZ and Taituara. Off the side of that, we have regional council seats seeing some of the material as it comes out, as is a Taituara reference group. And I'd have to say that the Bay of Plenty features quite heavily amongst these groups and is probably doing more than its fair share of heavy lifting around this. Bay of Plenty people are populated right across those groups. And just a shout out to Simon from Tauranga City Council, has provided some really useful stuff into the Taituara reference group that I chair, and that information is flowing through into the form steering group. We are subject to non-disclosure agreements, and some of this is quite tricky because there's so much information coming through. It's quite hard to remember what's confidential, what isn't. I haven't. There are some matters that are quite sensitive that are under discussion, but if you have a look at the Randerson review, that really is the blueprint. And unlike the Three Waters, where there was quite a lot of stuff going on that couldn't be released, actually a lot of this stuff is sitting in that Randerson blueprint. We are meeting regularly, and there's an awful lot of information coming past us very, very fast, and it feels that it's gathering pace. The MFE are doing a great job taking the advice of the steering group. The steering group's most definitely having some robust discussions that will stay within the steering group, but that advice is going forward with the cabinet papers to ministers. Oops, here we go. So this is a, sorry. This is a diagram I stole from the MFE stuff that's in the public arena. And that's really just an overview of what the system is intending to do. And what you can see on the left-hand side is that we have an awful lot of documentations and we have an awful lot of decision-making that's going on at the consenting level. And having been a consents officer many, many years ago, I can tell you it's a really hard job. There are very big decisions made consent by consent with very little guidance as a junior officer, and there's an awful lot of decisions that influence our country sitting at that level. So that you can see the intent of the reform is to kind of flip that on its head a little bit and make the system quite a bit more prescriptive, so that there's a lot more certainty sitting down there in the consenting process. And also the object of reducing the number of the planning documents. So a lot of detail in that, but I'll move on in the interest of time. Okay, so starting with regional spatial strategies, these are looking to be mandatory, one per region. Sitting on those panels or on those governments will be central government, local government, Iwi Māori. Long-term infrastructure, land use planning, the Climate Change Adaptation Act is, we are yet to see the material for that, but that will feed into that process. Some potential, I think we discussed this in a previous meeting about how the link to the LTPs might work in terms of infrastructure and costs on local government, and the potential for it to work the other way into central government. So it's something to do with the Apuriki presentations. Still catching up, isn't it? Right. So what I thought I'd just focus on is the local voice work, because it's well and truly in the public arena and it's owned by the local government steering group, so I shouldn't get myself into too much trouble discussing this. So if you recall the previous document, which was quite heavily weighted at a higher level, at a national level and at a regional level, one of the obvious challenges with the system was how to retain the local voice and the bottom-up component in the system. So Minister Parker resourced the steering group to go away, and a subgroup of the steering group went away and locked ourselves in a room sometime before Christmas and thrashed out a proposal. And what we did was we took the shape of the Randerson recommendations, and we built some plugins into the system to try and account for that local voice. It went out for consultation through January, February. We received some really good submissions from the sector, including one from the Bay Plenty Regional Council. And that was then submitted into MFE in late March. And we've had a few discussions about how that's landing with ministers and MFE. There you go. So this diagram is one created by the steering group. It's not owned by MFE, so there's no problem with talking about this in public. So while we started at the bottom of the system, we very quickly found ourselves at the top of the system, and government are proposing the national planning framework, which my take on that is it's sort of hoovering up all the existing pieces of national guidance and gluing it all together in very simple terms. What the steering group saw was missing was some sort of national spatial strategy that laid out big picture infrastructure, things like power lines, things like aquaculture, which was obviously top of mind for me. But everyone in the group had something where we thought there was a national spatial component. And so we encouraged them to add some sort of national direction so that when regions picked up spatial strategies, it's already part populated by some of the overarching government intentions for the nation. And then if we flip right back down to the bottom left-hand corner, this was the proposal we came up with for local authorities and regional authorities and iwi to put statements of outcomes. Personally, I don't like the name. I thought it more as a community plan, but planners got hold of it and it became statements of community outcomes. So what we envisaged, but for a TA, potentially in partnership with iwi and potentially doing one in the district or maybe 2 or 3, depending on how that landed with iwi, was it's really that aspirational document that says this is what this district is about, this is what we've got going for us, these are what we want to achieve, and here are the things we need managed. And it would sort of be a non-technical type input into the bottom of the system, and then that would land with the committees to try and make sense of what these things look like across the region and how they would feed into the spatial plan and how they would feed into a natural built environments plan, which is more focused on the managing effects and so on. We thought if the iwi couldn't do it jointly with councils, that they needed to be able to do their own statements at the bottom of the system. There's been some discussion about what a regional statement of environmental outcomes might look like, and I think it's quite clear that's very, very different to the territorial authority one. There's still some discussion floating around about what that looks like, but that would cover off on quite a different set of functions, what will be covered in the TA one. And so the idea is that those documents, they hoover up all the stuff we have at a local level. When you think about what a TA has, we have LTPs and structure plans and reserve management plans, and you name it, we've got a plan for it. So this will be the first synthesis of that documentation before it feeds into the regional committee. So we would hope that a regional committee would see the value of that community voice determining what's important to go forward into that planning process. I won't go into the middle part, is really the stuff that's working its way through policy decisions at the moment. But down on the right-hand side, we also came up with the idea that district plans are full of a whole load of stuff that is really only there because we haven't got a decent mechanism through bylaws to manage it. And it became a bit of a standing joke about the roosters of Portakey, because the day we happened to be talking about this, our staff were sending me texts. They were hilarious about how they were running around chasing down roosters because they were in breach of the district plan for crowing in town and so on. And the MFE folk were a bit staggered and said, but the RMA doesn't control roosters. And we said, well, yes, it does, but should it? And so we actually proposed to the minister, MFE, probably shouldn't go into that. We proposed to the minister to have a look at the bylaw functions. And if the bylaw functions could be strengthened, have some decent enforcement provisions, you could actually drop a whole load of stuff out of district plans. Yes. So personally, I think that's quite an important component, and we'll keep keep driving that through the system, just to drop out some of the stuff and let the regional committees. Can you imagine a regional committee dealing with roosters and split pig? I don't think so. So, or horses or whatever the thing is that community is being bothered by. So it did feel important that there's something at a local level that can be managed at a local level with a tool that's a little bit more efficient than the resource or the NBEA or the Strategic Planning Act. Yes, I won't get into the middle stuff, that gets very processy and very complex. Suffice to say that this is a really complex system and it's overlaying the current shape of local government, and there's some inherent tensions between the two, which I think will play out in time to come. And when we start to see the legislation coming out, I think some of those tensions will become apparent. Also just raise the question that the Randerson review, all 553 pages of it, did not have a lot of local government input. It had a lot of legal and interest groups, but not a lot of local government. So I think there's a question for local government about how do we feel about the Randerson review as the starting point, and I don't believe we've actually been asked that question ever. So going forward, the major policy decisions are now made, and they've just been shared with the steering group today, actually, the last lot of them. The Natural Built Environment Act and Strategic Planning Act to be introduced in late 2022 and looking to be enacted by the end of the parliamentary term. MFE have noted they want to engage in Mayoral Forum sometime prior to introduction, but today was too early for them. But they'll be coming out to talk to folk, and there's some discussion about briefing National Council and getting the sector chairs briefed fully. We know the submissions are closed on the climate change National Adaptation Plan and Emissions Reduction Plan. The Climate Change Adaptation Act, talking to introduce it to Parliament by the end of the parliamentary term. Now, we've not seen any of that yet, so that's quite a big ask. And quite a lot of other work going on around the system to support the reforms and support the change that's going to be needed. The model project's an interesting one, with about four regions having put their hand up for that. Decisions on that will land shortly. So I'll probably stop there. Yeah, so next thing we'll be seeing MFE coming to engage prior to the legislation coming out in its first form.
Thanks, Amy. Thank you. Judy.
Thank you. I just, considering where the Natural and Built Environment Act is at in terms of close to introduction, one question that I've asked the Minister twice, face to face, and could not get an answer from, was the current status, the status in the new Act of current resource consents that still have some life, but may not under the new Act have been approved, if they've been applied for now, but they may say 15 years left of a consent. What happens to those?
I don't think we've had any specific material around that, but generally consents like that will run to the end of their term unless the regional council decides to review them. And there are review provisions that sit in those consents anyway that could be triggered anyway. So my understanding is they would run to the end of their term and then enter the replacement system. And there's a whole bunch of inbuilt things in the RMA around taking into account existing investment and so on. I can't see those disappearing.
The concern was that, one, they'd like to know if it wasn't going to get renewed in the future. They were happy that that might be the case, but their concern was, I've got all this time supposedly left, and does it still have legal credibility?
Jane.
It feels a bit like a sprint to the finish, doesn't it? And I guess what worries me about policy that's developed at speed with very many inputs is that there's a high risk of law of unintended consequences coming to land. So what work's being done by the steering group to try and mitigate those unintended consequences? For example, I saw on the thing, on the presentation, there was going to be a lot more permitted activities. which is fine, but when you've got environmental bottom lines and we've got this raft of new legislation coming through which are reinforcing those environmental bottom lines, how do we manage that with all of these permitted activities and unclear regulatory frameworks? So just there's so many tensions and it's happening so fast, and then you've got a national government that's saying we'll unwind all of this if we get into power. So I just see 5 years of huge uncertainty ahead.
Don't really know how to answer that, except to say most of our meetings are full of, but what if, what would happen if, what if you do this, how's it going to land? Usually followed by, oh, that's a really good point, we'll think about that. So.
And I have to say, I was on council when we changed from Town and Country Planning Act to RMA, and it was supposed to be enabling. So everything was permitted if you could mitigate the effects. So same tensions.
That's my concern also, is that if this, one of the motives was to make the process more agile for applicants, which we all thought was a great idea. But the more I thought about it was, you know, I know as having been a commissioner, is that you have approved and things that are not allowed, non-permitted activities, and then there's a whole grey area in the middle where if you can set the right conditions in place, something can be approved. My concern is if fast tracking means we get rid of the grey and we just have black and white, how does that work for, you know, the future for applicants? It could be very, maybe that's a good thing, I don't know, but I'm just saying it takes a lot of that individual situation by situation decision making if you're trying to keep it fast tracked.
One of the challenges I see with it is that you'll see from when you flip the system on its head, there's actually quite a long lead-in time before that system, before the policies work through that system. So one of the issues I see is sort of a moratorium would be too strong a word, but a period of time where you're going to struggle to develop anything unless it's already encoded in the documents that are operative, and for everything to filter back down the other way, it could be quite a long time before the system's actually up and running the way it's intended to run.
So where you're growing, and you want to get on and do stuff, you come to the screen and hold.
Thank you. Thanks, Aileen. Great to get the update. Can I please go back to your diagram? Is it possible to get the arrow diagram up? Thank you. Aileen, when you look at the local, so you look at the statement of community outcomes for us as TLAs, invariably they will encompass the 4 wellbeings. And so I see the arrow going up, and I can see what the regional spatial strategy and the natural built environment plans could pick up out of that. But there'll be a lot of community outcomes that don't relate to any of the regional. So where do those outcomes get picked up? And have you had conversations about where the rest of central government is in that structure at the regional level about committing to enabling working as a whole of government, so public sector, to enable those wider community outcomes? So I'm thinking MSD, justice.
Presentation.
Yes. So is that being talked about in the structure for that though? Absolutely has, and good observation, because as soon as we did this, we went, oh, this could be useful for the 3 waters too. And then Gary, I think it was, said, oh yes, that looks like a useful thing to use as well. So I totally agree, it could be useful for all sorts of things.
Absolutely. So I've got Stevie and then Gary.
I think you touched on it very lightly. Thanks for your work in there. With you and Toby, I feel really quite confident that that working party has got the heft that we needed in the local government sector. But you touched on the future of local government, and I see this as more fundamental to the future of local government actually than the 3 waters, because I think I can see where it's going. I don't have a problem with it, but it does raise the issue about the future of local government and regional council, and is it playing into the hands of strengthening the EDA for setting national standards, national policy statements, you know, national climate change strategy, and for unitary authorities to be the enabler.
sure I can answer that.
I take it that's a rhetorical question.
It is.
Yeah.
And Aileen's not going to answer it.
I don't think Aileen can.
No.
I think the politicians in the room probably are much better qualified to answer that one.
All right.
Gary.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks, Aileen, once again for putting this wiring diagram, because it was really helpful to us in the Three Waters. The only difference that we came to is you're in that green box at the bottom, or those three green boxes. You needed a dotted line running from that up into Natural Built Environment Plan and up into Regional Spatial Plan and up into the National Planning Framework. So that's how it had the, from the National Planning down to the sort of TA Statement of Outcome, and from the TA Statement of Outcome up to the National Planning Framework. It's a two-way flow of trying to develop a commonality. So, we found that diagram really helpful, and that was the only bit that I thought would change a little bit to allow that bottom-up flow. Thank you.
Yeah, it is actually a very good diagram. It doesn't fill me with a great deal of confidence that it's going to be easier to do stuff. Anything else? Anything else? All right. Thanks, Aileen. Really, really helpful presentation. Okay, so that brings us to Treaty Waitangi settlements, claims and related kaupapa. So Fiona, nice to have you with us. Sarah's disappeared. I take it that, is it long?
Well, Madam Chair, Gary Weber here. Because this is information, I'm quite happy to take it as read and move receipt of the report.
You happy to move
Second
that, are you?
Yes, I am. Well, that's the recommendation.
Second
And I would second that, because there are, I see none of our settlements on there, but I think that's up to us to put them forward. I didn't know this was going to be a paper, or we would have added in the settlements going on in our rohi.
All right, so maybe for the next meeting, we get a roundup around the region. And chief executives can make sure that they forward that info to Fiona. All right, so it's been moved and seconded that we take it as read. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried, thank you. Climate change program update. Fiona?
Tēnā koutou katoa. I think this one's going to be taken as read as well. I just wanted to highlight just how well the region is doing in terms of those joint submissions. It's just fantastic to see the region jointly submitting. And this is a real example of where we are working together very well. That Carlos Wednesday is an example in terms of Taiwana, the International Council, Whakaputahi. I do see this as a key agenda item for the next triennial, so we'll continue to provide you with agenda reports.
Thanks very much, Fiona. So would someone like to move that we receive the report? Lynn and Judy second, thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And that brings us to the final item. Gosh, we did that quickly, didn't we? We're only going to be half an hour late. So Lynn, I'm going to hand over to you.
I think in a future life, Aileen is going to need to write a book. Not 100, 500 pages. However, I do know that the stack of reports that Aileen has had to move through and develop and ensure that they were consulted on in her time as CEO of a Portuguese district, especially around the harbour project, is much taller and wider than she is. And I've been contemplating the name of that book. Would it be The Never Ending Hurdles to Jump Project? or I was trying to think of a couple of the other ones. How many times before a no becomes a yes? I've covered that today. But I understand that 12 years ago, Aileen was told her KPI was deliver that harbour. Well, she's bloody done that. And now she needs to move and go and do wonderful things somewhere else. And I have to say that since joining the council in 2013, I have learnt so much from watching in operation an amazing CE who has enhanced the capability of her staff, who has enhanced the capability of her councillors and mayors by her work ethic, her knowledge, and her belief in the work that she's doing. And I also believe that single-handedly, Aileen has probably managed to achieve the most of everything that's been possible in the Pōtiki district for our community moving into the future. And there's so many things that she can drive past and say, oh, I was involved in that. My team did this, our council did this, our community did this. And that's how I will reflect when Aileen has moved to Thames Coromandel, that so much that's happened in our space is through her skill, her knowledge, her passion for doing the best that she can for our community, and her bloody hard work. So thank you, Aileen. Thank you very much. This is a thank you from us for the work that you've done. And, you know, the times that we travel to meetings, either in Rotorua or here to Tauranga, very good getting things done times as well, which have always been good value for both of us. I'm happy to drive and Aileen's happy to work. So that's been really good. She'll be sorely missed in our space, and Aileen, wish you lots of luck, and I know we'll catch up lots of times, and I'm just pleased that you're not leaving until the end of July, because there's still lots to do. Aileen is a finger on the pulse person who has resurrected the health of a Pōtiki district through her work.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure how to answer that either. Yeah, gosh. There has a lot has happened. The last 2 years has been utterly overwhelming with the amount of stuff that has landed upon us. We had the perfect storm in that the PGF finally came off at the same time as all of the post-COVID funding, and our little council that were built to spend about 18 million a year, we're actually carrying 136 million in implementation. So the last 2 years we've just been buried. And if you've not seen me for the last 2 years, I make no apology. I've been head down, backside up, getting the stuff done. But I do, reflecting on the stuff we've achieved in the last 2 years, it comes from decades of planning. So it comes from folk who've gone before us. I think of folk like Selby Fisher, who was absolutely determined to buy some blocks of land to the angst of quite a few folk around him, because that would enable a use further on down the track. John, absolutely determined to retrofit the entire planning framework around a harbour and aquaculture, because that would enable that to happen. So I think have been in a council that had no money, but a lot of dreams and a lot of time to plan for those dreams has, in the last 2 years, has absolutely paid off. And another one was Jim Mansell. Jim was fabulous to us and his foresight. And some of the stuff you probably don't even know he did around earthquake-prone buildings on our main street. Folk like him that have just done that strategic planning, and then, you know, a moment in time and suddenly we can do stuff. So that's, for me, that's really what it comes down to. And, yeah, got a lot of people to thank from the past who've done that thinking. Whakatō here, Ranganui Walker, yeah, all of those guys. So, yeah. And Bay of Plenty, I'm going to miss Bay of Plenty, but I'm going to be back, so for weekends and so on. So, but yeah, I've been here, gosh, 27 years, I think, in the Bay. So it's home. I've had 2 sons here. My sons have never known life without the harbour. They were born into a world where the harbour was, you know, on the horizon. So they've celebrated that with me as well, and they'll celebrate me moving on to Thames Coromandel, and I gather I've got a wharf up there that services an aquaculture industry to build. Well experienced. Yeah. So, yeah, thank you guys.
Gee, just a question to Aileen. When you get to be driving in the car with Lynn, do you actually have your eyes open now? You wouldn't have had them at the last meeting.
Petrol consumption went way down when I took over John's car.
Aileen, we wish you well. We wish you well from Rotorua. You've been an amazing advocate, and I know you from when you were working with John. And as a previous buddy MP for Thames Coromandel, they are a fabulous community up there, disparate like some parts of the Bay of Plenty, but there'll be nothing that will surprise you up there, and I'm sure you're going to add all your wisdom into a council that really does need that support for their new leadership team. So well done. And for me, on a personal note, your kindness is something that stands out as very unique. So thank you.
Thanks, Dee. I was going to say, Aileen and I first met when I bumped into one of my constituents who was coming in to talk to the regional council. You know, life's full of ironies, isn't it? Because you were developing a policy around rating on water because of a boat that was parked in the Tauranga harbour that was acting as a restaurant. And so this constituent who was owned the oyster farm at Ohiwa Harbour was coming in to talk to the council about what these changes were going to mean for him. And so I said to him, well, I've got a few minutes. Do you want me to come with you? Because he was very nervous. So, of course, the arrival of an MP into the meeting caused all sorts of havoc. And all these people appeared suddenly for this little quiet little meeting. All these people appeared, including Aileen, from all over the building. And of course, the irony is now that people are talking in Tauranga about, you know, how do we get that boat restaurant back when we build a new wharf. And I keep saying, no way, because I know the effect it might have further around the bay. Anyway, Aileen, I think for me, what you have done is, and I saw it at first hand, as you well know, your competence, you proved your competence to the bureaucrats in Wellington. And really, you know, when we think about it, that was the biggest battle that a Portuguese fought for 12 to 15 years, was that those Wellington agency staff did not believe that a small rural council like the Portuguese, and I'm sure Kauro comes up against it, could actually manage to do the work that you and Vaughan before you had led, And it was competent work, and they made you rework it. It cost a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of energy. But in the end, you proved to those bureaucrats that, that the competence was there and they could trust you. And I think for any chief executive with a project like the Rotorua Handbar and agriculture, there's no finer record for you to move on. And the fact that you are now involved and trusted by those another group of bureaucrats in what is a huge piece of work around planning is a testament to that competence. So we wish you all the best. You will be missed from the Bay of Plenty. You have an enormous history here, but we wish you every kind wish for the work that you're going to do in Thames Coromandel. And one of these days they might come over the hill this way. I know they're not happy about being with Entity B in Waters, but we have a lot more in common than we have that divides us. So all the very best. And on that note, I will close the meeting. We didn't actually start with a karakia. Do we want to finish with a karakia?